All right, what's good? I'm halfway through my screenplay for the sequel to my movie, The Death Pledge. Death Pledge signed an agreement last week to be released sometime later this year, targeting October. It's really far out now, so we really, I can't specific dates, just give like a season, so it's a horror movie. We're looking for October, which is prime for horror movies. I'm excited about that. I don't know if you can tell, but sometimes you ever be so excited that you don't want to really act, you don't really act excited. You're too scared that you might mess it up. You can't believe it. So that's really where I'm at right now, and I don't know if you can tell, but I don't really talk about it, and I think that's the best, example of my emotions that you could probably see, is that I don't really talk about it. I'm just nervous, I'm waiting, I'm excited, I've built up anticipation, I'm overwhelming with anxiety, you name it, it's all there. But anyway, all of that, and I'm writing a sequel. And I might have mentioned it before, because over the summer I wrote the sequel to my series, The Harlem Shake, and I've been reading, little blogs of people talking about how they write sequels and how they deal with the writing of their sequels, and or writing of series and books and stuff like that. And a lot of them say that you don't necessarily want to read the reviews of your first book before you write your second book, because sometimes that can weigh heavily on you. The pressure. And then some people say to write a sequel and not know what people thought of the first book is also a disadvantage. So you can't really win for losing. I think me, I wrote the sequel to the Harlem Shake 2 years after the release of the Harlem Shake, and I had already watched the reviews, and at the time the book came out, and still to this day, I haven't checked the reviews today, but it's still got a 5-star rating on Amazon, and that's the highest rating you could get. And I'm like, nobody is really, none of the reviews were like extremely detailed. Just say, love it, nice pacing, things like that, really enjoyed it, whatever. And so there was pressure to maintain, to write another good book, right? But, Harlem Shake was a story that came to me. I remember the process and putting together and outlining and formulating the story. It wasn't necessarily a hustle book. It was more so a hustle title. Or the title came to me like real easy. It was like calling it Black Earthquake or whatever. And I was like, that's not going to work. So I decided to name it Harlem Shake after the dance craze, and I just thought it was cool, simple, and it spoke to what was happening. It was an earthquake happening in Harlem, told through, a person experiencing the earthquake in Harlem. And I was like, that's beautiful. So then I continued it as the series, the Harlem Shake series. And it was a little bit of pressure to, not really, no extra pressure because of the book, but there was a little bit of pressure in wanting to do another good story. It was a little bit of pressure in, I guess, continuing the story. I don't know, really having the energy, because the way I had thought of the story, it worked so well that it wasn't even any pressure continuing the story. Even though the first book ended, it ended with a beautiful way to start another story in that story. Now, the sequel kind of leaves you at the end of the story as well. Even though it can end like that, another story can follow it. So it's not a trilogy where, you know, like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, where, you know, they have to get this ring to the end, and you got to go through book 2 and to get to book 3, because that's where the ending is. There's no overreaching arcs. I think that's the problem with Game of Thrones, is that you put all of these arcs out here, you introduce all these beautiful characters, and, you know, each book is, you know, turning you on to some new character, a new world, and you got to wrap all of this up, and you got to figure out, well, whose arc are you going to wrap up? And you never thought about that from the beginning, so you got all of these arcs, and you just, stop? That's the biggest thing, you know. The cool thing about writing a story from the very beginning that you know is going to be 3 or 4 books, you can see the overreaching arc that will end the story. But sometimes, you know, and that's the challenge with Game of Thrones, some of them lose their momentum basically because they didn't set you up for that end in the beginning, you know. So I didn't want to have to do that. Now with the Death Pledge sequel, again, the Death Pledge, I think I had in the back of my mind to do a sequel, but it was patterned after Friday the 13th and Freddy and those slasher horror movies. So the potential for a sequel was ingrained in it. And again, it's not a sequel like 50 Shades of Grey. Well, that's not probably a good example. What's another good? Matrix, where, you know, you get into something in the first story that you got to see kind of resolved by the third story or whatever, and the second story is like really good build up to put that third story together. I don't have that with the Death Pledge. The sequel is not necessarily a standalone, but it is a standalone. It is a moment, you know, there's a chronology to the standalones, but each story is complete. I don't know, it's like, because even Indiana Jones, as much as that story was a trilogy, they never paid homage to any of the previous stories in any of his next adventures. So they were all another adventure, another, you know, chapter. And Death Pledge does have a chronology attached to it, but you don't necessarily need to see it. It's not necessarily a full continuation. It's another follow-up, but it isn't, you know, something that if you've watched the first one, you got to see, you're drawn to see the next one. So that's one thing. And then, you know, I'm in this, I was talking to my son earlier today, and I was telling him, you know, I'm at that point in the story where I've kind of planted all my seeds. And, you know, now I'm on the second side of that, where the seeds are coming out. They're, you know, everything is all the characters have been introduced. So now I know how to write them. I know their voice. All I have to do now is kind of just play it out, because everything else has been laid out. And it's on like the back end. And this is a beautiful side of the story, because your chronology is, your order of events are done. Now it is back, you know, it's the back end. You don't have to really go to any new places. You don't have to create, you know, any new environments. All the environments are just, have been already created. So, boom, now I'm just having fun. So I really just want, I'm reading a book and I'm writing a screenplay, but I'm like, now I'm just ready to write the screenplay for the whole day, because I don't even have to put any deep thought in it, because I've thought of everything already. I don't know how to explain it. It's like I had to think how these scenes were going to play out on a primary level. And so now the next scenes are just a graduation of those scenes that I already wrote, like fight scenes, scary scenes. It's a horror movie, so the scary things, scenes, how the ghosts are going to behave, all of that is laid out. So now I just got to do it over and better, or do it, have the two entities meet, and or three entities. And this one is like three entities coming together, and they're just going to create a bigger conflict or interaction. So that's really what it is. And I don't know, you know, it happens more so in screenplays. In writing a book, it will probably happen, you know, towards the last few chapters of the book, you know, your climactic rise, you know, coming to your finale. But it does feel good to have micro created, if there's a word, but you create your overall world, and then you have to go in and create every scene and things like that. And now I don't have to do any more of that. I'm just playing with all of my existing pieces. It also reminds me, on the heels of coming from this gamer convention, you know, that in writing a tie-in novel, especially something like a gamer novel, you have all of these tools and equipment that they have put together from this board game, and now you just have to make a story utilizing them. So that's kind of how it feels when you're on the back end of your screenplay or your story, that you have everything you need, you know where everybody's going. Now it's time to just, you know, use them and wrap it up. So it just feels good that for that. I don't really have any tips on that. I do know, for me, it helps to have a really good outline. I'm a planner in terms of my stories, so I don't necessarily write with the expectation to go back and rewrite and major redraft. I like to get everything flushed out from the beginning. There's like a couple of things that I've added after I finish the scene, but it's like really minor tweaks, and they only are like icing on the cake. They just make it better. And then when you watch it, I will even be like, damn, how did I think of all of that? Well, many times it's just that I've written out the skeleton and put enough meat on the bones for the person to move, but the extra curves and the hips or whatever else that comes with it comes later. So that's about it. So thank you very much. I don't know what you get from these, but it gives me a chance to vent and talk. And I would have liked to have had somebody, you know, walk me through some parts of the writing process when I was writing. So sometimes when you listen to other people talk, especially as a writer, it may not be a book or anything that you get, but you get information and things that you might need from hearing their story. So that's really it. All right, y'all, I'm out. Peace. Log on, like, and follow me. Peace.